have Rebecca Long from the Spokane Teachers Credit Union. Her talk will be on the building stakeholder confidence. To do justice to her bio, I'm going to let her introduce herself briefly and then launch into the talk. Thank you.
Okay, so can everybody hear me okay? Okay, awesome. If I move too far off and you guys can't hear, let me know. So I am Rebecca Long. Like I said, I am going to be talking about building stakeholder confidence through an automated test system. So I wrote a paper. It's in your proceedings. Feel free to read it. It has a lot of cool technical things that I'm mostly going to gloss over in this talk. This talk, I'm going to focus on the confidence piece, the people side of what I did. So why I did the automated test system, okay? We're all at a testing conference. Testing systems are cool. Automated testing systems are cool. There's plenty of talks about that. So I'm going to talk more on the how you utilize that for people, okay? Just to kind of get a feel for everybody, how many people are QA? Yes, awesome. How many of you are like SDETs, like automated testing? Okay. Do we have any outliers like developers in here by chance? Okay. It's all right. You guys are friends. How about project managers or management? Anybody in here? Okay, got a few of you. Awesome. All right. Before I get too far into like who I am, why I'm here, I did promise to do a selfie if everybody is cool with that. Is that cool? Just just kind of roll with me. All right. You can wave or whatever. Hey. Okay, awesome. Thank you. You guys are awesome. All right. All right, moving forward. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so before I talk too much more, my background is what I'm going to talk about, and then basically I'm going to go into the story of my team and what we did, some of the challenges that we experienced, and the opportunities that kind of came from that, okay, because we have people have a lot of emotions, and software, while we might think that's kind of void of emotions because we like logic and computers and all of that, we actually are building software for people, and there's users involved, which means we have emotions and all sorts of fun things that go with that. Okay, so that's kind of where this kind of falls in. All right, who am me? Who am I? I have rainbow hair. That's kind of my thing. I also have computer science degrees. That's great. I've taught at local colleges. Awesome. I run a local QA group. Pretty cool, I guess. Mostly, I hang out at my credit union, and I've been doing QA there for the last 4 years. All right, so who's my credit union? Who's STCU? We're the third largest credit union in Washington State. We're based out of Spokane. We got a few branches there. We're also in North Idaho. How many people belong to a credit union? Yes, nice. I think it's the 20th is International Credit Union Day, so everybody else can switch if you haven't. Okay. Just throwing a plug out there. Okay, so we have actually a pretty good-sized IT department for a credit union. Credit unions are not generally well known for IT. When I started there, I didn't really believe that they had an IT team because credit union, little tiny thing, whatever. But we actually have a really good size IT. We have a software team that when I started, there was only 5 people. And then in the 4 years I've been there, we've grown to 13. So we've more than doubled in size, which you might imagine if you've been on a small team that has grown. There's a lot of growing pains that kind of go with that. And how do you kind of expand? How do you deal with all of those things? Naturally, as we got bigger, we developed cool software. If you develop cool software, you might notice people want more cool software. It's kind of this trend, right? So, okay. All right. So, let's talk about the story. Yes?
Does your team develop software or mostly support?
We now develop software, a lot of software actually, internal software and external software. So, internal software for our employees, which is the software that I'm going to talk about because that's my project. And then also we develop software for our members, externally facing software for online banking and stuff. Okay. All right, so not that long ago, in a galaxy really close by, so we had our small software team of 5, still big in credit union world, like I said. At the time, we mostly built little scripts, kind of helper scripts, helper apps, little tiny things. Just kind of did our thing. But everyone kind of got a bigger idea of what we could do. Had all these really cool ideas. We could do all these neat things. We could have better online banking tools because, credit unions are kind of not really catered to in the financial world. Mostly they cater software to banks. So if you're going for a vendor solution, we're not always top pick. So we have a software team to take care of that. So one of the dreams that came out of this was this application that I work on called Toolkit. And it's supposed to be like a one-stop shop for member service. So if you're a member of our credit union and you come in and you talk to an employee, they're going to be using this application to help service you, okay? So let's take a look at what it does. You might notice it looks kind of plain. It is a web app. It's written in .NET, but it's not the most exciting UI. But it does do a lot of cool things, okay? So you can create new memberships, look up memberships, account information, transactions, update contact information, create maintenance accounts like relationships, joints, things like that. We can do credit card balance transfers. So if you're with Bank of America and you switch to a credit union like ours, we can help you. You can order checks if you still use checks, or get a new debit card. We have a thing for starting conversations with members. So if you want, like if it's your birthday, our app will tell you, hey, make sure you tell the members happy birthday. And then we also have forms because it's still a financial institution, so we have lots of forms that we get to play with. And so we have a lot of servicing around that. All right, so this is much bigger than scripting, little apps, things like that, right? We're going from little tiny stuff to this monster application that's really cool. Okay, so you might imagine we had some growing pains, like I hinted at, all right? So what kind of things did we have to deal with? All right, so we had to learn the environment setup, okay, which doesn't sound that exciting or that big of a deal, but there's actually a lot of integration points that we had to deal with that we hadn't ever integrated with. And not all of our vendors were used to dealing with teams like us who want to integrate with them. And so we had a lot of back and forth we had to deal with and kind of scope out all the test systems. How do we get proper setup for all of these things on proper integration? So to kind of highlight it, this is a really poor graph, but it kind of gives you an idea. We have lots of different databases that we connect into. We have some vendor stuff that's in the cloud to take care of all of the feature sets that I mentioned. And then we have other external applications, including SharePoint. How many people like SharePoint? Anybody? Yeah, okay. So we integrate with all these things, and so it's a challenge, okay? So we had a lot of things we had to kind of hurdle over. Okay, other challenges. So going from a small team where we didn't really have to deal with user acceptance testing or anything like that, we were maybe under par on release tracking. I'm not sure if you guys have experienced that, but I feel like that's a pretty common one. So we needed to kind of kick that up a notch. So here's some release tracking joys that we dealt with. Like we used Jira. Has anyone else used Jira? Yes, love Jira, okay. We weren't properly utilizing it. We had just got it. We were still learning it. It's trying to set it up. There's a lot of cool things you can do with systems like that, but it takes time to configure it. It takes time to figure out what you need. Okay, so we weren't really doing that. We also were trying to do too many things in our releases. Our scope was way too big. We had all these really cool ideas, and it's just, we got to get it out, we got to do all this stuff. It's going to be great. That makes everything more complicated. It's harder to track everything. So, as you might expect, unexpected fixes or features or bugs even would get into the release. And it's not always ideal. Also, we would forget to mention, so we'd hand over like a release candidate, we'd tell, hey, users, here's our stuff, here's all the stuff in it. We would have promised in previous conversations we would include things, and then we would forget to list it, or we would forget to include it because somewhere it got lost. Okay, not good. Those are bad things. Okay, and stakeholders always noticed. They are on top of it. Like, hey, what is this? I wasn't expecting this. What is this bug? You didn't mention that there's a known bug. That kind of stuff, okay? Not good. Now, the challenge we faced, we used stakeholders for testers, which is good in one sense because you want them to be doing like UAT. They are the business owners. They would know the insides and outs of that better than software people. I mean, you should know what you're doing, obviously, but they're going to know it a little bit more on the other side of it, okay? So we were leaning on them a little bit too much for testing, a little bit more than ideal, okay? So we were trying to do UAT, but the QA section, the QA testing, actually should be a little bit smaller because we were trying to rush it out the door a little bit too quick. Thankfully, our users for this application were back office people. They were not members, so that is a benefit in this case. So depending on, I mean, it's still not good, okay? So, all right, so what happened with this? We had, so we rushed things out the door too quickly. We had insufficient time for internal testing, so that was me. Stakeholders were kind of leaned on for bug testing, not just user acceptance testing, okay? So that's the difference here. So what does that equal? They discovered a lot of bugs, right? Not good. Right? And you guys may be familiar with Netscape. How many people have used Netscape? A few people? Back in the day? Okay, taking you back. All right, so Netscape did this cool thing where it's called wide betas. Okay, where the developer, I'm not picking on developers, okay, or anybody, but developers would say, oh, I'm done, or I'm mostly done, and then they would ship it out to their users, and as you know, you guys are the users, right, of the browsers, and so there were millions of people that would download these really buggy copies of Netscape, and you might guess correctly that people didn't appreciate this, and your first reaction is, wow, Netscape's really buggy. I might use something different than Netscape, right? So you start shifting away from that application because your confidence level in that application goes down, right? Natural reaction, okay? Okay, so that happened to us as well, okay? So our users were finding all these problems. They were losing faith in us as a team and as our process, you know, that was just in our application. Trust was broken. So just like with any relationship, so you have a relationship with other people, your friends, your family, your spouse, right? If you start telling them something or promising something to them and then you aren't delivering on that, what's going to happen? They're gonna lose faith in you, right? And that relationship is going to dwindle and it's going to, erode. It's not good, right? That's not good when you're a software team and you have users, especially like maybe your users are people that are paying you a lot of money, right? That is really bad. You could be losing money for your company. All sorts of fallout could happen, okay? Okay, so what happened in our case? They lost confidence in us, so that meant since they still had to deal with us as an internal software team, which was our benefit, but they did start requesting a little bit more stuff. So we're an agile team. We wanted things to be rushing out the door quickly, right? Quick turnaround on delivery. But now our users were requesting greater detailed release notes. They wanted every little thing documented, even things that really didn't pertain to them, like configuration stuff. They're like, oh, I want to know everything you're doing, every little minute detail, which you can't blame them. I mean, they weren't sure what we were doing. They thought we were doing all sorts of weird things. So makes sense that they would request that. However, that kind of slows everything down. They wanted, they then also rechecked every little thing on the release notes, everything. So like even all the stuff that we tested internally, they would retest it, and they would, not just the stuff that we listed, they would also do full regression testing. And as you can guess, that took a lot of time. And so our release cycle went from, we're going to go really quickly to, oh, we're going to go really slow now. Totally opposite of what we wanted. All right, so how do we fix this? So we had to come up with something because this was not working. This was not a good thing. So if you're in this situation, you're in luck, Okay, so how do you rebuild? So the key is we need to rebuild that trust element, okay? And so there's some elements to trust. There's a lot more stuff that goes into trust, obviously, but these are the main things that I thought were important for this scenario, okay? Accountability is important, mostly just because you need to acknowledge that where you are, what happened, how did we get here? So we acknowledged we made some mistakes, we're a new team, we're growing pains, I'm sorry. We want to fix it. So you have that acknowledgement and accountability up front. Okay, so that's just kind of background. The other two parts that I'm mostly going to focus on are the reliability and the investment. Okay, so those are the two key elements that we focused on for this project.
I'm sorry, the investment in the testing tool?
I'll get to that. Stand by. Okay, so the goals for our project, we were like, okay, well, we need to rebuild this. How do we do that? What are our goals? Okay, so before we even do anything, what are the goals of what we want to do? So we needed it to be reliable, right? So what do? You automate things, right? Everyone loves automation. It's what you do. Automate all the things. Consistent testing. That also comes with automated testing. Duh, right? So we have consistent tests. You're constantly running them every time. Great, okay? Everyone knows that. Okay, so the key also here, though, is the stakeholders helping write the tests. Okay, so that is what is awesome. That is the investment. So you want the stakeholders to invest in the testing process. You want them to feel more invested into the application itself. So they are no longer on the other side of the fence, like back in the day when we had devs just chuck things over to QA, right? And we're like, oh, I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to do any testing, right? We don't do that anymore, generally speaking. So we don't want to do that with the users either. We don't want to just chuck it over and be like, hey, here you go, users. Good luck, right? We don't want to do that. We want them to be included. They are part of the team now, okay? So that's where you bring in that investment. The other two pieces, bring in that reliability. Your tests are going to be reliable. You can count on them. Great. Bring in that investment. So this was our test system design. We had the stakeholders at the top. They're writing the tests. So we use SpecFlow to do the writing or the actual tests themselves. So that is what the actual users were able to write. So I trained the users to do it. It's not that complicated for even non-technical people to pick up. You can train them in pretty quick. And then that feeds right into Selenium. So our application is web-based, .NET. So Selenium was a natural pick, and that just ties right together. And then the Selenium stuff, I'm not going to get into a lot of the technical details of this. If you have questions on that, feel free to ask me after or read the paper. But basic Selenium setup with page object model, make it nice. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with SpecFlow, SpecFlow is pretty cool. It's the .NET version of Cucumber, which is a Ruby thing. So it bridges the gap between the domain experts, the business people, and developers. So it's super nice to pull in the requirements. We now have our technical analyst. He writes the requirements using this format. So all of our stuff going forward, we can immediately start pulling it in, and he works with the business people automatically up front to do this. It uses the gherkin language, and you might pick up the theme of cucumbers here. Okay, so gherkins are little tiny cucumbers, but it's kind of cool because it's a domain-specific language. It allows you to easily document out what you're doing. Okay, so here's an example. So it uses the given, when, then format. So given some precondition, when some action is performed by an actor, so your user, your stakeholder, the employee, your member, whoever it is, then there's some testable outcome. So what happens? Click on this button. So I'm in this application, I click on this button, then something happens. I move forward, okay? So here is an example of what we did. And this was written by our users, our stakeholders. They wrote it out. I pulled it in. We didn't give them Visual Studio, but they wrote it in a notepad document, text file, no big deal. And I just pull it right in, and off we go. We have automated testing, right? There's some more magic behind the scenes, but that's basically how it goes, okay? It's pretty neat, and they immediately have that feeling of investment. They can prioritize what tests that they do and which ones we want to focus on, which ones are more important, and they immediately know what's going on. They know what the test coverage is. They're totally involved in every step of the way. Okay, so then that feeds into Selenium. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but it's browser automation. It's awesome. We tied this all into the build system. I'm not going to talk too much about this either, but TeamCity is our build system, and we have it running Selenium on a grid, so it runs whatever we need. Okay. It also produces some stakeholder-friendly reporting using pickles, again, with our theme. Okay. So this one is living documentation, and so it's really neat. It'll spit out basically all of the gherkin stuff, the SpecFlow tests, and then it'll also have, I don't have it in my little graphic, but it'll have like little check marks if it passes, and a little X if it doesn't. And as it expands, there's a little table of contents on the side, so you can break it down by feature. So each SpecFlow has a feature file. Okay, so those will be listed out, and you can tell from a glance what passed, what didn't, and you can hand this over to your stakeholders and be like, here's the status of everything. Isn't this neat? And so they know immediately. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to give them like an end unit report or something that has a lot of technical detail, and maybe like if there's a bug, then there's an exception that has a whole bunch of, developer stuff that our users probably don't want to see or they would be confused by. Okay, so this kind of gives them a high-level view. Okay, so teamwork. So has this really helped? Yes. Yes, of course it has. Okay, I wouldn't be here otherwise, right? So, of course it's helped. It's awesome. We're still kind of new in this project, but we're already seeing benefits to it for both the stakeholders and our team, the software team. We have the stakeholders have a better understanding of what's going on. They understand our application better. They understand the environment setup better. They have a bigger investment into our test suite, so they are totally invested. They're like on board the whole way. And then they have a greater voice, and they feel that. You can tell that they feel that they have their voice heard. So they, on test coverage and the priority of what tests are being automated, which ones are being included, so that we can have this as part of our release cycle. And so that helps kind of build that confidence, that helps build that trust and that relationship between the software people and the business people. And you can do this too, okay? So you guys all have users. I assume if you're building software, you want to have users, and so you just bring them in. Bring it, if you have your users are like the masses, then maybe do like a subset of those people and bring them in and have them, represent the larger whole, right? So it's building that partnership that really kind of boosts the confidence, okay? So it's not necessarily what tools you use, it's just bringing them into the flow, bringing them into the process. Okay, so, and that's my talk. I have time for questions, and then I have my contact info in here for, yeah.
I was just going to say, with what sounds like a fairly small testing team, I guess just you?
Mostly me for this project, yeah.
I know you said that your users are helping prioritize, but like, how are you really going through and deciding what you need to prioritize and what you cover first and when?
Excellent question. So the way we're prioritizing what tests to cover and what and when, we have, so I meet with the stakeholders, and we kind of go through it together, and I train them on how to think through it. With our application, we're still growing and adding features to it, so we kind of agreed that we would focus mostly, since the application is already in existence, right? And so we're kind of backlogging the tests. So we're focusing on the ones that are less likely to change and automating those first. So we already have like a roadmap of like the next year, year and a half of stuff. And we're like, oh, these features we know are going to change, or these sections will change. So let's hold on maybe those for until we get caught up. That's kind of how we're going about it. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm familiar with Selenium, but what is the Team City and the Auto Grid?
So Team City is a build system just like Jenkins or something like that. So it does continuous builds, and you can just tie it in with, building your application. And then the grid is the Selenium grid, so you can have, the Selenium grid. So you can have like the Selenium server, and you have all these little nodes on different versions of Windows or Mac or whatever, different browser setups, and so you can have it run on whatever you need. In the back, yeah.
I got 2 questions, is that okay?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. One is, how do you deal with the contradicting, conflicting stories or scenarios from stakeholders? And also, the other question is, how do you measure your success if you have to convince your department?
Okay, so your first question is conflicting stories from stakeholders. You mean like with requirements?
Yeah, or just the scenarios that they're dealing with and stuff. There might be some contradicting scenarios or conflicting stories or whatever.
Generally, with our system, we have like a workflow, and they are mostly interested in testing procedures and how our application fits into their procedure, which helps a little bit in that we're probably not going to get too many conflicting stories in that kind of sense. Every now and then they will send like some of the tests that need a little bit of tweaking, and so I just clean it up a little bit, kind of work with them on it. It's not going to be perfect, but it's still a lot better than having them not involved at all. Does that answer that question a little bit?
Sort of.
Kind of.
It's like all resolved with the next sprint cycle or whatever.
Yeah, for like new requirements going forward, we have a technical analyst that kind of helps vet all of that, which is really helpful. I totally recommend having a technical analyst or a business analyst on your team because they're amazing. And and they kind of help with that. And then your second question was,
How do you measure success if you're going to try to convince your department to go ahead and try this?
that is a really good question. If you're trying to convince them, then you probably want something before you do anything, right? So in that kind of case, you would just need to highlight where the problem points are. Like for doing this project, I basically, that's what I did, was like, well, we have this relationship problem at the moment, and how do we handle that? And since the stakeholders were going through and manually testing their regression testing, so which is what was taking so long, it's like, well, Selenium can do all of that manual testing by automating it. I mean, exactly what they're doing. And what's kind of nice with Selenium also is you could show it to the stakeholders. I mean, like, look what it can do. Like, it's doing exactly what you're doing because you can show them all the UI stuff, and so it's not quite like unit tests. That's kind of magic behind the scenes. Oh yeah, trust it works. Stakeholders maybe don't understand that at the same level. So I did a prototype of this, and it's like, look, this is what we can do. What do you think? And everyone's like, oh, that's cool. Like, most people on my team hadn't really seen it. So doing some sort of prototype on the side, that can help show this is a viable option for what we need. Yeah.
I have a follow-up.
Oh.
To follow up on the SpecFlow, when you have your gherkin statements, it looks like they document your functional requirements, and you're verifying those and communicating around the team. But from the previous question about the conflicts and also about prioritization, is my question, do you document the business requirements as well, which address the why are you doing this?
Well, that's what SpecFlow is kind of doing. Those are kind of the business requirements. They're just broken down and given when-then statements.
So they're all measurable. But those are functional requirements. So do you measure your business requirements separately?
No, it's all kind of mashed together in this case. Yeah. And then you had a question?
So for gherkin to really work, you need to have a consistent language, right? If there's giving you text files, you're essentially doing translating them essentially?
Well, I mean, what's kind of neat with SpecFlow is it really is just text. So yeah, so I have them put it in like a text file, Notepad, because they all have Notepad. Everybody who has Windows has Notepad, right? So I just have them type it up, and then they put it on a share drive. It's not the most efficient thing we got going on right now, but
You don't put them in Jira or anything at all? 'Cause there are
The-
add-ons that will let you do autocomplete and everything.
the new requirements we have going forward, that's what we're doing. We're totally doing that. We have like user story, Jiras, and we have a requirements field where we put in the gherkin stuff. That is super helpful for moving forward. For all the stuff that we developed before we got really organized with Jira, that's where we're doing this silly Notepad drop point. I pull it into Visual Studio.
Giving the stakeholders that autocomplete where they can see all the previous statements going into the main changes.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. Yeah.
I'm with the state of Oregon, and I think it would be a real challenge for our stakeholders to try to use the gherkin, that type of structure, semi-natural language, I guess.
Okay.
But I think our stakeholder would view it as an unnatural language. What advice do you have for that type of communities?
Well, are you able to, if you're able to work with them and train them, like I did multiple sessions with our stakeholders to do training, and we sat down and I gave them some documentation and I walked them through how to think like it. And it took a few sessions. I mean, it wasn't like, overnight. So if you can work with them and train them a little bit, kind of build them up to kind of think more in line with the given when then statements, then that is helpful.
If I can re-ask the question.
Yeah, go for it.
Do you feel your user communities and your stakeholder community embrace that, or do they have difficulty?
I think at the beginning it was a little bit, for the stakeholders, it was a little bit weird for them, for sure. But once they kind of got in the groove of it, they picked it up. And I think it's fine now. Like that's just kind of how, but it took a little bit. Even on my team, for our technical analysts, it took a little bit to kind of get it. Okay, this is what we're doing. It's going to be helpful. Here's why. Promise. And you kind of show them like the benefit of it, and so then they kind of understand maybe why it's worth the effort to learn it.
So I've done some training of some of our technical marketing folks on how to do gherkin, and my strategy was to write some for them originally. I want to eventually get them to writing their own, but what I'm worried about is them when they do finally start writing stuff, I'm going to have to rewrite things. How do I not insult them?
That's actually what's kind of my question.
Play nice, okay. How do we play nice with stakeholders? Okay, so you're kind of a teacher. Okay, so you got to put yourself in that kind of teacher mode, and think of it like you're teaching anyone who's new at something. If it helps to think of them as children, I mean that's not totally insulting, but kind of have that mindset like they're new to this. They're really new. They need your help, and it's not their fault that maybe they don't understand it or they make mistakes, and that's okay. And it might take a while. It might take longer for some than others even. But that's like with anything. If you think of how you learn something, sometimes you struggle. And then if you maybe aren't as technical, like as some of the stakeholders are, and they might view this as a technical thing, and then they might be adverse to it, and that might have be a hurdle for them to learn it. So just kind of having patience, I think, helps a lot with that, and just kind of walking through it again, be like, okay, well, here's what you did. Maybe we want to do it more like this, and here's why, and maybe walk them through how to rewrite things. Yeah. Carefully. Yes, in the back.
Yeah, I was wondering a related question here too. Like when you're working with your stakeholders, do you feel that you have to train them on common terminology? Because if you start building large suites of tests, you don't want to rewrite things over and over again in gherkin. You want to have something that's a similar function as another one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
How do you get them to do that?
So the question is how to get common language so that you're not rewriting a whole bunch of stuff so that everything is synced across a suite, right? We are still so new in this process. We haven't got to that hurdle at the moment, but I think it's a matter of maybe the bigger it gets, the more people you have helping with it, maybe give them a cheat sheet or something like that. I mean, like here's the terms, or like if you have business procedures that they're automating basically, which is thankfully what we're kind of doing, then you can be like, okay, well, let's just stick with what the procedure, someone else is writing the procedure outside of either of our two teams. So let's just use that as the common baseline for the language. And then that should help kind of wrangle things in a little bit. One of the cool things with SpecFlow is you can have parameters and stuff too. So I do find that I pull things out and rework things just a little bit so that I can parameterize it to make it easier on me. And that's I think that's okay. You know, I mean, you're not going to get the stakeholders to maybe understand how to do the automated parameterization of everything. But if you get at least the common language, you know, based on business rules or something like that, then that'll help, I think, as you get bigger.
That's what I was mentioning about the autocomplete. Either you can get them in an IDE where they can actually get that through the IDE, or there's a couple different add-ons of Jira with the sale that you can get that functionality in Jira, so it's a familiar environment for your business analysts and stuff.
Yeah. I think you had.
Our stakeholders are architects, and so they're a lot more technical maybe than your stakeholders.
Okay.
And they do the same thing. But we produce a step definition catalog.
Mm-hmm.
So you can say, well, here's all the steps that have already been written. You know, maybe you can just use those. Pull from the catalog first before you write your own.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
It's a way to keep consistency.
Yeah. So creating a common catalog that everyone can see and pull from.
The catalog has to be derived, though, from the existing steps, so that it's too hard to maintain otherwise.
Totally.
By a step definition, do you mean like an object repository or?
She brought up the gherkin. Let's say the gherkin says, given I want to use a toolkit, that's an existing step.
Mm-hmm.
So you can say, hey, look, you want to use a toolkit, here's the step you would use.
I see. Is that the functional requirement description kind of level, right, as opposed to the automated test level?
Well, your gherkin is like for us, the gherkin is the automated test. All our SDETs write gherkin. And then for us, there's Ruby underneath. So the Cucumber gherkin is a programming language. And so you're just listing those lines. And so they're all common. When I navigate to it, so you can say, what are all my toolkit steps? Well, I can use a toolkit, I can navigate a toolkit, I can have it open a toolkit, and catalog those, and people can draw from them to build their own feature files or scenarios.
Is that also the way at the credit union?
Well, yeah. Our stakeholders are writing the gherkin. We're trying to get them to write the gherkin for things that we've already developed that didn't get any requirements up front, well documented. And then we have our technical analysts working with stakeholders now to write the gherkin. So it's still business people that are all writing the gherkin. And then basically SDETs pull it in for the actual automation part. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of code that goes behind the gherkin side of it.
So the conversion to Selenium scripts is automated?
Yes. So in Visual Studio, we have the SpecFlow, and then the gherkin, the SpecFlow has like some code underneath it that's in .NET, and then that calls into Selenium, and then Selenium calls into building or running the app.
Basically, the gherkin language is just business level language with user stories, and then there's step definitions, which just do a regex match to those words, so given my login as a valid user, does a regex max on that, and then passes it off to the code to call Selenium to do a login action.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
So what degree of your success do you feel like is now in stakeholder confidence versus finding actual issues?
I think it's probably more on the confidence side. So far, this hasn't really found too many issues, which is good or bad. I don't know. The point of building the system was not necessarily to have fast automation or find all of the bugs. It was really just to kind of start building that relationship. So that was the main thing, and that has been a success. So to me, that we're doing good. Yeah, we have other tests for and unit tests and things like that that are more online with the other stuff for bug finding. Any other questions?
If I can ask you a semi-related question.
Sure.
Specific to testing. I also belong to a credit union in the Portland area.
Awesome.
And,
Yay.
I know they decided to use kind of a commercial off-the-shelf, or at least a commercially available software for these membership functions, including bank transactions and so forth.
Sure.
How come you guys develop your own?
Well, we still use a lot of vendor stuff. We have a core system that we purchased and we utilize. It's just, and it came with a UI and a whole bunch of client applications that employees can use. It's just not super friendly. It's not there's a lot of functionality, and it also isn't completely integrated in with all of our other systems like debit cards necessarily or ordering checks and things like that. And so we just wanted to make it simpler, and so we're basically overlaying the core system. And then same thing with our online banking. We have a vendor for that, but we do a lot of applications that kind of tie into it to kind of help enhance it. So that's kind of, we're still working with off-the-shelf stuff. We're just trying to make it better.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
If there's no more questions, let's show our appreciation by giving